She spent the night in the cabin, letting the fire keep her warm and using the time to regain strength. She knew that the next stage of her journey would require careful planning and continued vigilance. The figure remained outside, maintaining a quiet watch, and she felt a sense of reassurance from his presence. She realized that she was not entirely alone in the world, that someone had chosen to protect her without asking for anything in return. This small act of kindness gave her hope and a renewed sense of determination. Morning arrived with a soft light filtering through the trees. She packed her bag carefully, checking that she had all essentials and making sure nothing was forgotten. She stretched her stiff limbs and took a deep breath, feeling ready to continue her journey. The figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, motioning for her to follow a safe path through the snow. She nodded and stepped outside, ready to face the forest again, knowing that she was not alone and that help was nearby if she needed it. The journey was far from over, but with trust, determination, and the silent protection she had found, she felt prepared to move forward. Step by step, towards safety and the hope of a new beginning. The morning air was crisp, and the snow sparkled as the woman stepped outside the small cabin. She adjusted her bag on her back and took a deep breath, feeling the cold bite at her cheeks and hands. The figure who had been following her remained at a distance, watching quietly but offering a presence that made her feel safer. She had learned to rely on his silent guidance, and now she felt ready to continue the journey. Toward a place of real safety and a chance to begin again. The path ahead was difficult, winding through thick forests, open fields covered in snow, and icy slopes that demanded careful navigation. Her legs ached, her fingers were stiff from the cold, but she moved forward steadily, one step at a time. The figure followed at a distance, keeping watch, guiding her indirectly, and ensuring that she remained safe without ever approaching too closely. She felt a growing trust in him, a recognition that his presence was not a threat, but a protective force in her life hours. Passed as she moved through the snowy wilderness. The wind blew steadily, carrying the sound of distant wildlife and the occasional snap of a branch. She had learned to listen carefully to the forest, to distinguish between ordinary sounds and signs of danger. Every step required concentration, but she also began to notice the quiet beauty around her. Snow-covered trees, the way the sunlight reflected on the ice, and the stillness of the forest brought moments of calm amidst the tension of her escape. At one point, she noticed a figure in the distance, moving closer. Her heart leaped, fearing it might be him, her husband, come to catch her. She froze, scanning the trees for cover, ready to hide if needed. But as the figure drew nearer, she realized it was the protector who had been guiding her all along. His careful movements and calm demeanor reassured her, and she felt a sense of relief wash over her. He pointed toward a safer path, indicating that they should continue, and she followed without hesitation. Trusting his judgment, the terrain grew more challenging as the day progressed. She had to climb steep hills, carefully picking her way over rocks hidden beneath the snow. Her bag shifted with each step, and the cold pressed in, but she kept moving. She knew that stopping could leave her vulnerable, and she could not afford to be caught. The figure behind her stayed vigilant, guiding silently, occasionally signaling safer footholds or hidden obstacles. She felt grateful for his presence, realizing that his help had been crucial to her survival so far. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, she saw signs of a small community ahead. Smoke rose from chimneys, and she could make out the outlines of houses and barns. The thought of reaching a populated area filled her with hope, but she remained cautious. She approached slowly, scanning the area for any signs of danger. The figure stayed behind, making sure she moved safely without exposing herself to unknown threats. She found a small, welcoming cabin at the edge of the village. It appeared sturdy and warm, and she knew she could rest there for the night. She entered carefully, securing the door behind her. Inside, the warmth was immediate, and she felt her body begin to relax. The journey had been long and perilous, but she had survived. She set her bag down and stretched, feeling the ache in her muscles ease slightly. She thought about the forest she had crossed, the snow, the wind, and the dangers she had faced. And she realized how strong she had become. The protector remained outside, standing silently in the snow. She could see his shadow against the dimming light, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had relied on him without fully understanding him, but his presence had been a lifeline. For the first time in years, she felt the possibility of trust, safety, and even companionship. She wondered who he was and why he had chosen to help her, but she knew that questions could wait. For now, she needed to rest and regain strength. Night fell, and the village quieted. The warmth of the cabin was comforting, and she allowed herself to relax in a way she had not been able to for a long time. She thought about her past, the fear and pain she had endured, and the life she had left behind. But she also thought about the journey she had completed, the challenges she had overcome, and the presence of someone who had cared enough to guide her to safety. She felt a sense of hope growing inside her. Fragile but real. The next morning, she prepared to continue. She packed her bag carefully, making sure she had all necessities, and stepped outside into the cold air. The figure appeared once more, signaling the safest path forward. She followed him, moving steadily through the snow, feeling more confident with each step. The forest beyond the village was still challenging, but she had learned to navigate it, to trust her instincts, and to rely on the silent protection she had found. As she moved through the forest, she thought about the possibility of building a new life. A life where fear no longer controlled her, where she could find safety, warmth, and perhaps even love. The thought gave her energy, and she pushed herself forward, determined to reach a place where she could start over. The figure stayed close enough to ensure her safety, yet far enough to allow her independence. And she felt a quiet gratitude for his careful guidance. The sun began to set as they reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. She could see the signs of habitation below, fields, small homes, and lights beginning to glow as evening approached. Relief and hope filled her heart. She knew that once she descended into the valley, she would be much closer to safety. The forest behind her was still dangerous, but the hardest part of her journey was behind her now. She felt a sense of accomplishment and courage that she had not felt before she descended carefully, following the path that the protector indicated. Her steps were steady, her movements cautious, but she felt a growing sense of security. She realized that she had not only survived physically, but emotionally as well. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty, and she had endured. The presence of the protector had made a difference. But her own strength and determination had carried her forwards as night fully fell. She reached the valley and found a small, welcoming home where she could rest safely. The lights inside promised warmth and shelter, and she allowed herself to smile. She had made it through the snow, the forest, and the dangers that had pursued her. She had survived, and now she could begin to build a new life. The protector remained outside, watching from a distance, and she felt a sense of gratitude and trust for him. She realized that this journey had been more than a physical escape. It had been a journey of courage, resilience, and the discovery of hope inside the home. She settled by a fire, letting warmth fill her body and mind. She thought about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead, and about the freedom she had earned. The snowstorm, the forest, and the dangers were now behind her, and she could finally feel a sense of peace. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them with courage and determination. She had survived the journey, found help in a stranger, and discovered her own strength. The night passed quietly, and she slept deeply for the first time in years. The fire burned steadily, providing warmth and comfort, and the valley outside lay peaceful under the moonlight. She dreamed of a life free from fear, a life where she could move forward with hope and confidence. The figure who had guided her remained outside, watching over her, and she felt a quiet gratitude. Her journey was complete, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the life that awaited her. She had escaped, survived, and found a chance to begin again. The night was quiet except for the sound of wind rushing through the trees and snowflakes softly falling from the sky. The small cabin stood alone on the edge of the forest, surrounded by a thick blanket of snow. Inside, the woman sat on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest, listening to the creaking of the wooden walls. Every little sound outside made her heart jump because she knew he could come at any moment. She had lived with him for years, always walking on eggshells, never knowing when the anger would come. Tonight, Something inside her had changed. She could no longer live in fear. She had to leave. She had to get away. She moved carefully across the room, trying not to make a sound. She had packed a small bag with a few essential things: a warm coat, extra clothes, some food, and a few personal items she could not bear to leave behind. She checked the bag again to make sure nothing was forgotten. Her hands trembled, but not from the cold. It was fear and adrenaline mixed together. Every second felt heavy, every breath a struggle to stay calm. She could hear the wind howling outside, but she tried to focus on the task at hand. The snow would help cover her tracks if she moved quickly. She looked around the cabin one last time. It had been her home, but it had also been a place of pain. Memories of harsh words and sudden anger filled her mind, but she pushed them away. She could not let the past hold her now. She had to focus on the future, however uncertain it might be. The door creaked as she slowly opened it. She took a deep breath and stepped out into the cold night. The snow was deep, almost reaching her knees, but she had no choice. She had to move fast. Every step was heavy, but she forced herself forward. Keeping her eyes on the faint light of the moon reflecting off the snow, the forest stretched out before her, dark and silent. She knew some paths through the trees, old trails that led away from the town and deeper into the mountains. She followed them carefully, keeping her ears open for any sound. The wind carried every little noise, every snapping branch, every distant howl, and she flinched at each one. The cold bit at her fingers and toes, but she ignored it. She could not stop now. She could not let him catch her. As she moved through the snow, she noticed something strange. Footprints appeared alongside hers, but they were not her own. Someone was there, walking quietly in the same direction. Her heart raced. Was it him tracking her, or was it someone else? She slowed down, trying to see through the dark forest, but the trees hid everything. She could hear the faint crunch of snow with each step behind her. Panic rose in her chest, but she forced herself to keep moving. She had to reach safety before she could think about who was following her. Hours passed as she trudged through the snow. Her legs were sore and her breath came in short gasps. The moon moved across the sky, casting pale light on the white landscape. She stopped to rest, finding a small hollow between two trees. She crouched down, shivering, trying to warm her hands by rubbing them together. The bag felt heavier now, but she could not leave anything behind. She had to keep going. She thought about the few people she could trust, but the town was far away, and the mountains in between were dangerous. Still, she had no choice. She could not go back. Not tonight. As she rested, she noticed movement in the distance. A figure, tall and strong, was following her quietly. He did not make any sound that she could hear, but she could feel his presence. She wanted to run, but exhaustion held her in place. There was something in the way he moved, careful and deliberate, that made her hesitate. He did not seem like her husband. He seemed different. There was a calmness in his steps, a steady rhythm that did not bring fear. She watched him through the trees, unsure what to do. The cold was becoming unbearable. She forced herself to get up and continue walking, hoping to find shelter. She could see the faint outline of a small cabin in the distance. It was old and abandoned, but it would provide temporary safety. She hurried toward it, leaving deep tracks in the snow behind her. The figure followed at a distance, keeping a careful watch. She could not see his face, but she could feel that he was there to help, not harm. Still, trust did not come easily after all she had endured. She reached the cabin and pushed the door open. Stepping inside, the wind and snow tried to follow her, but she shut the door tightly, pressing her back against it. She was trembling, but not only from the cold. Her heart was still racing from the fear and the unknown. She set the bag down and tried to catch her breath. The snowstorm outside was loud now, howling around the cabin, and she felt the walls shudder. She listened carefully, hoping the figure outside would stay hidden and not reveal himself too soon. Minutes passed, maybe hours, she could not tell. The cold seeped through the thin walls, and she huddled in a corner, trying to keep warm. Her thoughts kept returning to the danger she had escaped, the life she had left behind. She thought about the moments she had wished for freedom, the small acts of courage she had hidden inside herself. Now that she was free, even temporarily, she realized how much strength she had gained. The snow outside felt like a challenge she had to meet, and she was ready to face it, step by step. Suddenly, the door creaked slightly, and she froze. She held her breath, expecting the worst. But there was no rush of anger, no threatening presence. A calm voice whispered from outside, telling her to stay quiet and that she would be safe. She hesitated, then peeked through a small gap in the door. The figure stood there, tall and strong, with kind eyes that seemed to understand her fear. He gestured for her to stay put, and she nodded slowly. Unsure but sensing that he was not a threat, she sat back down, clutching her bag, and waited. The snowstorm raged on, but inside the cabin, there was a small flicker of hope. She realized that someone had noticed her struggle and had chosen to protect her even from a distance. It was the first sign that not everyone in the world would hurt her. It was the first step toward trust, toward a life she could begin to rebuild. The night was long, and the storm was fierce, but she had survived the first part of her journey. She closed her eyes, letting herself rest for a short while, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges but also new possibilities. She had taken the first step toward freedom, and that was worth everything. The first light of dawn began to touch the edges of the forest, casting a pale glow on the snow that covered the ground. The woman woke slowly, her body stiff from the cold and the long night spent crouched in the small cabin. She wrapped her coat tighter around her and looked outside, hoping the storm had softened a little. The wind was still strong, but the snow had calmed, and she knew it was time to continue her journey. She had to keep moving if she wanted to get far enough away from the life she had left behind. She stepped outside. The crunch of snow under her boots loud in the still morning. Her bag felt heavier now, each step a reminder of the long path ahead. She took a deep breath of the cold air, letting it fill her lungs, and forced herself to focus on the trail. The forest stretched around her, the trees tall and dark against the white snow, their branches heavy. She moved carefully, scanning the ground for uneven patches or hidden ice. Every step required concentration and care. She could not afford to fall or get hurt. She moved. She began to notice the signs that someone was nearby. Footprints appeared alongside hers, following at a distance. At first, fear surged through her. She froze, heart pounding, imagining her husband catching up. She listened to the faint sounds of movement, trying to tell if it was someone dangerous or not. Then she noticed the way the steps were placed carefully, without breaking twigs or disturbing the snow more than necessary. There was a calmness in them, a gentleness that made her hesitate. It was clear that whoever was following was not trying to scare her. She continued walking, keeping a close watch but not confronting the figure. Her mind raced with possibilities, wondering if she should turn and ask for help or stay silent and move quickly. She decided that it was safer to keep going. She had learned to trust her instincts, and they told her to move cautiously but not to panic. The forest seemed endless, a maze of white and shadows. But she found small markers that guided her path, old tree marks and faint trails left by animals. She followed them, hoping they would lead her to a safer place hours past. And the forest seemed to grow darker as the clouds thickened again. She felt fatigue in her legs and cold seeping deeper into her bones. Her bag weighed heavily on her shoulders, and every movement became harder. She stopped to rest under a large pine tree, leaning against its trunk. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, trying to regain strength. The footprints behind her stayed visible in the snow, a reminder that she was not alone. She wondered silently who the person could be, feeling a strange mixture of fear and hope. The presence was protective, but still unknown. She continued moving more slowly now, careful with each step. The terrain changed, becoming rougher and steeper, snow covering hidden rocks and fallen branches. She had to use her hands at times to steady herself, scraping her gloves against bark and ice. The wind blew hard, carrying flakes of snow into her face. She could barely see through the swirling white, but she forced herself onward. She thought about what lay ahead, imagining shelter, warmth, and a place where she could finally rest without fear. The thought kept her going. The figure behind her stayed quiet, maintaining distance, never coming closer than necessary. She felt relief in knowing someone was there, but kept her guard up. Years of living in fear had taught her not to trust easily. Still, the careful movements, the way the person seemed to anticipate her needs without interfering, suggested kindness. She noticed small things left along her path at times. A stick to help her cross a tricky patch of ice, a trail cleared of fallen branches. Someone was looking out for her, and it made her journey slightly less lonely as the sun rose higher. The snow began to reflect the light, creating a soft glow that lit the forest in a gentle white. She took a moment to look around, seeing the beauty of the world she had not noticed for so long. The tall trees, the soft snow, the quiet strength of the forest around her gave her a sense of calm. She realized that she had survived the first night and was moving forward, step by step, through difficult conditions. The fear was still there, but it was mixed now with a sense of determination and hope. She came across a frozen stream. The ice slick and dangerous under her boots. She paused, examining the crossing carefully. Her bag shifted, threatening to throw her off balance, and she held onto a branch for support. The figure behind her appeared at a distance, helping without speaking. He pointed to safer spots and waited patiently, ensuring she could navigate the ice without falling. She nodded to herself, grateful for the silent guidance, and carefully made her way across. The snow on the other side felt firmer, and she allowed herself a small sigh of relief. The forest began to thin, revealing the first signs of open land. She could see the outline of a distant ridge and small clusters of trees that might hide a place to rest. Her steps became quicker, driven by the hope of reaching shelter. The figure continued to follow at a distance, maintaining his quiet watch. She noticed that he stayed back, never intruding, but always present. She began to feel a sense of safety, knowing that even in the vast wilderness, someone cared enough to watch over her as she approached a small clearing. She saw the faint outline of another cabin in the distance. It was old, perhaps abandoned, but it offered the promise of temporary shelter. Her legs ached, her breath was short, and her fingers were numb from the cold, but she pushed herself forward. Each step was a victory, each movement a declaration that she would not give up. The journey was far from over, but the sight of the cabin brought hope. She reached the cabin and pushed open the door carefully. The wind and snow tried to follow, but she pressed the door shut, leaning against it. The interior was small, dusty, and cold, but it was safe from the storm outside. She dropped her bag and sank to the floor, trying to warm her hands by rubbing them together. The snowstorm still raged beyond the walls, but inside she felt a moment of relief. She had survived another part of her journey. She rested briefly, listening to the wind, feeling her heart beat slow. The footprints in the snow outside reminded her that she was not alone. The figure stayed hidden, watching over her, ensuring that she could recover without interruption. She realized that she had found an ally, someone who understood the danger she faced and chose to help. For the first time in a long time, she felt a faint sense of hope. The path ahead was still difficult. She was not walking it alone. Hers passed as she warmed herself slightly and regained strength. The snow outside began to lighten as the storm moved on, and she could see more of the surrounding forest. She thought about the journey so far and what lay ahead. There were dangers she could not predict, obstacles she had not yet faced. But the presence of the figure gave her courage. She knew she would need to continue moving soon. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, to breathe, and to imagine a life free from fear. As the day progressed, she prepared to leave the cabin, checking her bag and stretching her stiff limbs. She looked outside, seeing the snow glisten under the sun, and took a deep breath. She stepped out carefully, ready to continue her journey, knowing that the figure behind her would remain a protective presence. The forest stretched before her, challenging but full of possibility. She moved forward, step by step, with cautious determination, knowing that each moment brought her closer to safety and to the chance for a new beginning. The snow-covered forest stretched endlessly in front of her, its quiet beauty hiding the dangers that came with it. The woman took slow, careful steps, her legs aching from the long journey. Her bag weighed heavily on her back, each movement reminding her of the long hours she had already walked. She kept her eyes focused on the faint trail ahead, looking for markers that would guide her safely through the forest. The sun was low now, casting long shadows that twisted between the trees. And she felt the chill growing stronger as evening approached. She had learned to listen to the subtle sounds of the forest. The snapping of a twig, the distant call of a bird, and even the shifting of snow on a branch could all signal something important. Her heart beat faster whenever she heard a sound that did not belong. The presence of the figure who had been following her gave her a strange sense of safety, but she remained alert. She knew that the forest could be unforgiving. She had to keep her senses sharp suddenly. She noticed signs that she was being followed by someone else. The footprints in the snow were fresh and irregular, the kind left by someone rushing or careless. Her chest tightened, and fear gripped her once again. She could not tell how close he was, but she could sense the danger. She forced herself to remain calm, reminding herself that she had survived worse situations before. The cold air burned in her lungs, but she kept moving, pressing herself forward despite the fear that threatened to paralyze her. The figure behind her remained a steady presence, moving carefully to stay hidden while making sure she could see nothing but the trail ahead. She realized that he had become her silent guardian, offering protection without ever confronting her directly. His careful movements through the snow, the small signs he left along the way, showed that he understood the danger and wanted to help her survive. She felt a flicker of gratitude, mixed with cautious curiosity about who he was and why he had chosen to help as the daylight faded. She reached a section of the forest where the ground sloped steeply downward. Snow-covered rocks and hidden roots made each step treacherous. She had to use both hands and feet to steady herself, sliding carefully across the ice and snow. Her heart raced with every slip, but she forced herself to stay focused. One wrong step could mean injury or worse, and she could not allow herself to fall. She thought about the cabin she had left behind, about the warmth and safety it had offered, and longed for another such place. Even if only temporary, the footsteps behind her seemed to match her pace now, careful and deliberate. She realized that the figure was guiding her silently, letting her move at her own speed, while ensuring that nothing threatened her from behind. The forest was growing darker, and she could feel the temperature dropping with each passing minute. Her fingers were numb, her breath visible in the cold air, but she pressed on, knowing that stopping now would only make her journey harder. She had survived the first night, and she would survive this two-way. Sudden sound made her freeze. The snap of a branch, closer this time, and the distinct crunch of boots on snow sent a shiver down her spine. She knew immediately that it was him, the one she had been fleeing. Her husband had found her trail, and now he was closing in. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to think. She remembered the figure who had been following her, the silent protector, and she drew strength from the thought that she was not completely alone. She moved faster, taking calculated risks to navigate the icy slope. Knowing that speed and careful attention were her best chances, the snow around her became uneven, the forest thick with underbrush and fallen branches. She stumbled several times, her body aching, but she forced herself to get up each time. She could hear the sound of pursuit growing closer, the heavy steps of someone determined to catch her. Fear pushed her forward, but she also relied on her instincts, remembering paths she had learned long ago and using them to create distance between herself and the danger behind. At one point, she reached a clearing with a small frozen stream running through it. The ice was thin in places, and she had to carefully pick her steps to avoid falling. Her bag shifted and threatened to throw her off balance, and she gripped a tree for support. The figure behind her appeared in the distance, motioning toward safer spots and silently guiding her across. She followed his direction without question, trusting his judgment even though she did not know his name or why he had chosen to help. She reached the other side safely and allowed herself a small sigh of relief. The pursuit continued, but she could see the forest beginning to thin ahead. She knew that she had to reach a safer location soon, or the risk of being caught would increase. Her mind raced, thinking of possible places to hide, places where she could rest and plan the next stage of her journey. She remembered a small cabin that she had seen on a previous path, a place that offered shelter even if it was abandoned. The thought of it gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She pushed herself harder, Despite the exhaustion that weighed down her body, snow continued to fall lightly, and the wind carried it against her face. Her breath came in short, visible clouds, but she kept moving. Every step brought her closer to the promise of safety. The figure behind her stayed at a careful distance, making sure she could move freely while maintaining protection. She noticed small details he left behind. Branches shifted to make her path easier, slight markers indicating safe footing. His presence, though silent, gave her courage to continue as she approached the clearing near the cabin. She could hear the faint sound of the stream, ice cracking under its shallow flow. She moved slowly now, carefully assessing each step. The threat of her husband was still present, but the figure behind her continued to guide and watch. She felt a mix of fear and trust, knowing that her journey depended on both her own strength and the careful protection she was receiving. She finally reached the cabin and pushed open the door cautiously. Inside, the cold air and the smell of old wood greeted her. She leaned against the door, catching her breath and letting herself rest for a moment. The snowstorm outside was less harsh now, but the darkness and chill remained. She dropped her bag and huddled in a corner, trying to warm herself. Her muscles ached, but she had survived another dangerous stretch of the journey minutes past. She allowed herself a brief moment of peace. The figure stayed outside, making sure she was safe. She realized that she was not alone, that someone had chosen to help her without forcing her to rely on them. This silent protection gave her hope and courage. She thought about the long path ahead, knowing it would be difficult. But she also knew that she could continue because she had survived this far. The forest around her was quiet again, and she could feel a small sense of relief. Knowing that she had made it through another part of the snowy wilderness, the woman had moved through the forest for what felt like endless hours. Her body was tired, her legs sore, and her fingers stiff from the cold. But she knew she could not stop yet. The figure who had been following her remained at a careful distance, guiding her silently without ever speaking. She had come to understand that his presence was protective. And though she did not know his name or intentions, she began to feel a small sense of safety. She trusted him enough to follow the trail he subtly helped mark, knowing that each step forward was a step toward survival. Snow-covered path led her to the edge of a small village that she had heard about but never visited. The buildings were old and modest, with smoke rising faintly from chimneys. She moved cautiously, keeping her bag close and her eyes scanning for any sign of danger. The streets were empty, and the snow muffled any sound, creating an almost surreal quiet. She felt a mix of relief and anxiety, hoping that someone in the village could provide temporary shelter, but also wary of revealing herself too soon. She spotted a small cabin on the outskirts of the village, partially hidden by trees. It looked abandoned, but it offered the chance to rest for a short while. She approached it carefully, testing the door before pushing it open. The cold air from outside rushed in, but inside, it was sheltered from the wind. She leaned against the door, catching her breath, and allowed herself a moment to rest. The snowstorm outside had lessened, but the forest and the path she had traveled reminded her that danger was still near. The figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, his presence silent but reassuring. He gestured toward the cabin, indicating that it was safe for her to enter. She nodded, feeling grateful, but still cautious. She placed her bag inside and moved to sit on a wooden bench, rubbing her hands together to restore warmth. The cabin was small and simple, with dust covering the floor and old furniture. But it was a refuge from the cold, and the threat of pursuit. She began to warm herself, thinking about the journey so far. The forest had been unforgiving, and her body bore the marks of the struggle. Every step had required careful attention, and the fear of being caught had never left her mind. Yet she had survived, and with the silent help of the figure who followed, she had managed to navigate through the most dangerous parts. She realized that the kindness of a stranger had made all the difference, and she felt a faint sense of trust growing inside. The figure remained outside, keeping watch as she rested. She noticed that he never approached too closely, giving her space while ensuring she was safe. This careful distance allowed her to regain some sense of control and independence, even as she relied on him for protection. She thought about the choices she had made, the courage it had taken to leave her old life behind, and the determination that had driven her forward through the cold and snows the day past. She took the opportunity to explore the small clearing around the cabin. She found firewood and began to build a small pile, knowing that warmth would be essential as the night approached. The figure stayed at a distance, observing and occasionally helping by pointing out safer areas or better wood to use. She began to appreciate his silent support. Understanding that he respected her space and allowed her to take the lead in her own survival, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. The temperature dropped further, and she worked quickly to prepare a fire. She felt the cold biting at her skin, but the warmth from the small fire slowly eased the stiffness in her muscles. She sat close to the flames, letting herself rest and regain strength. The figure remained outside, a shadow in the dimming light, ensuring that no danger approached while she took a much-needed break during the evening. She allowed herself to think about the life she had left behind. Memories of fear and pain surfaced, but she pushed them aside, focusing on the hope of a new beginning. The village nearby might offer more opportunities for safety, food and shelter, but she knew that she could not fully relax yet. Her journey was far from over, and the forest beyond the village still held risks. She resolved to continue moving. As soon as she regained enough strength, the figure finally approached the cabin, staying at the threshold, visible but not imposing. He gestured that it was time to rest, indicating that she could stay inside while he kept watch. She nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and curiosity about him. She wanted to understand why he had chosen to help, but for now, the need for warmth and safety was more important. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself feel the comfort of the fire and the knowledge that someone was protecting her. Night fell fully, and the village grew silent. The snow sparkled under the moonlight, creating a serene yet cold atmosphere. She felt a small sense of peace in the quiet, realizing that she had survived the most dangerous parts of the journey so far. The figure stayed outside, a silent guardian, and she began to trust that he would remain there until she was ready to continue. The fire crackled softly, casting light across the cabin, and she felt the warmth seep into her body, easing some of the tension and fear that had followed her for so long as she rested. She thought about the challenges that lay ahead. The forest would not be any easier beyond the village. She would still have to navigate dangerous terrain, unpredictable weather, and the possibility of being followed. Yet she felt a growing sense of determination. She had survived so far, and she had someone watching over her, someone who understood the risks and wanted to help. This knowledge gave her the courage to keep moving forward. Morning arrived softly over the valley, the light spilling gently across the snow-dusted ground. The woman awoke slowly, feeling the warmth of the fire from the night before, a comfort she had not known for so long. Her body felt more rested, though her muscles still carried the memory of the long journey she had endured. The valley before her promised a new beginning, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel hope. She moved carefully to gather her few belongings, thinking about the day ahead and the life she could start to rebuild. The figure who had been following her all this time appeared at a distance. As he had always done, his presence silent but reassuring. She felt a small smile touch her lips, knowing he had guided her here safely. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but words seemed unnecessary. He had helped without asking for anything in return, and that quiet support meant more than any words could convey. She took a deep breath, bracing herself for the next stage of her journey. Ready to face what lay beyond the valley, the village nearby was waking up as she moved carefully through the snow. She watched the windows glow with light, the smoke curling from chimneys, and the faint movement of people preparing for the day. Her heart beat with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She knew she was close to safety, but she also knew that her past could catch up if she let her guard down. She moved slowly, scanning the streets, aware of every sound, every shadow. The figure remained at a careful distance, watching silently, ensuring her safety. She came across a small shop at the edge of the village, its door slightly ajar, and the smell of bread drifting through the cold air. She stepped inside cautiously, her boots leaving small prints on the wooden floor. The warmth hit her immediately, and she felt her body relax for a moment. A shopkeeper looked up, curiosity in their eyes, and she nodded in greeting, careful not to reveal too much. She bought a few essentials quietly, her hands shaking slightly as she handed over the coins. The simple act of purchasing food and supplies felt like a small step toward reclaiming her independence, exiting the shop. She noticed the figure waiting at a distance, his gaze steady and calm. She allowed herself a small sigh of relief, knowing that he had not left. His presence reminded her that even in this new place, she was not alone, that she had a protector who understood the dangers she faced. She moved through the village streets with more confidence now, carefully choosing paths that were less exposed. Aware of the lessons she had learned from her journey through the forest, the sun rose higher, casting warmth across the snow, and she began to feel the possibility of a future beyond mere survival. She thought about finding a small place to stay, perhaps a room in the village, where she could rest and begin to rebuild her life. Her mind wandered to simple dreams, meals that did not come from hurried steps through snow, a fire that burned steadily, and a life without constant fear. The journey had taught her resilience, and now it was time to focus on hope. She moved toward a small inn at the edge of the village, sign creaking lightly in the wind. The figure remained outside, ensuring she could approach safely without drawing unwanted attention. She entered quietly, speaking to the innkeeper and arranging a room for the night. The warmth of the interior, the soft light, and the gentle hum of activity were comforting. She felt a sense of safety she had not known in years, a stark contrast to the fear-filled nights in the forest settling into her room. She allowed herself a moment to look around. The fire crackled gently, the bed offered comfort, and the small window looked out onto the quiet village street. She thought about the journey, the challenges, the danger she had faced, and the figure who had guided her. Gratitude and a quiet sense of connection filled her heart. She realized that while she had been guided by someone else, it was her own courage and determination that had carried her through. The figure appeared at a discreet distance, waiting as always, ensuring she had privacy and safety. She wanted to speak to him now, to acknowledge the role he had played in her survival. But she also understood the quiet strength in his silence. They did not need words to communicate the trust and bond that had grown through shared hardship. She felt a deep sense of connection and the knowledge that she was no longer entirely alone in the world. As the afternoon passed, she explored the village cautiously, aware of the new surroundings and the possibilities they held. She walked along narrow streets, noticing the small details of life that she had missed for so long: children playing, neighbors greeting each other, the smell of fresh bread and smoke from chimneys. Each observation was a small reminder that life continued, even beyond fear and survival. She felt herself relax gradually, bracing the hope that the village represented the figure followed at a careful distance, his presence constant but unobtrusive. She realized that she had come to depend on the quiet guidance he provided, the reassurance of someone watching over her without imposing. It was a form of support that allowed her independence and agency, something she had never known before. She felt a sense of gratitude and understanding, recognizing that help could come without control, and that trust could grow slowly through actions rather than words of vain approached. And she returned to the inn, feeling more confident and capable. She prepared a simple meal, taking time to rest and gather her strength. The snow outside had begun to soften, and the village seemed peaceful under the fading light. She sat by the fire, thinking about the journey, the hardships, and the resilience that had brought her here. She realized that the most difficult part of the journey had been learning to trust, to take each step despite fear, and to rely on both herself and the silent support she had found. Night fell fully, and she rested comfortably, the warmth of the room and fire surrounding her. She thought about the future, the life she could build, and the freedom she had earned. The figure remained outside, watching over her, a silent guardian who had been part of her journey from the beginning. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had survived, that she had endured, and that she could now move forward with hope and determination. Morning arrived again, and she prepared to step into the day with renewed energy. She knew that challenges would continue, that the world could be unpredictable. But she also knew that she had the strength to face them. The village offered a new beginning, a chance to live without fear, and she embraced the possibilities that lay ahead. The figure appeared at a distance, signaling readiness to continue his quiet protection, if needed. She smiled faintly, acknowledging the bond that had grown between them through hardship. Trust and survival, she stepped outside, feeling the crisp air and the soft snow under her feet. Each step forward was a declaration of courage and determination. She had survived the forest, the storm, and the pursuit. She had found safety, warmth, and the possibility of a life beyond fear. The figure remained near, his presence a constant reminder of the support she had found, and she knew that she could face the future with strength, hope, and the confidence that she had earned through her journey. She walked forward, step by step, into the promise of a new life, ready to embrace freedom and the hope that awaited.